Hey, how are you guys?
Stink. You got Paul and John from the I-80 Sports Blog. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Excellent.
We know your nickname Stink, but the only thing it smells like in here is success. You were 3-0 in the big game in your career. Who better to guide us through the Super Bowl party food menu? Lay it on us, Mark.
All right, well, let me start. It starts with a television set, right? You got to have a great TV. LG's got the best, the OLED B8 series. I'm telling you what, over 8 million individually controlled pixels. I don't even know what the heck that means, but I know this: perfect blacks, intense colors, and right now, this beautiful 55-inch television, the lowest price it's ever been listed at $14.99. Check them out at LG.com. Then Digiorno crispy pan pizza. You got to have pizza at your party. Piping hot and crispy, baked in your own oven. Skip the delivery. Never's going to show up cold or with the wrong toppings or late. Comes in its own single-use baking pan from your oven to your party. 25 minutes. Digiorno.com. And then you got to have some protein on the menu. Purdue Fresh Cuts. I'm telling you what, fresh, pre-cut and trimmed chicken saves up to about 30 minutes in prep and cleanup. And I'm telling you what, straight from the packaging to the pan, it's so easy. More time with family and friends. Great recipes at Purdue.com. And then Farm Rich, all the snack foods that you could possibly want: mozzarella sticks, potato skins, and it's not a party without meatballs, for crying out loud. They've got the best. FarmRich.com. Check out their cheesy Hawaiian roll recipe with the meatballs. Going to be a huge hit at any party, and that's kind of one of the ways we kick it off here for the big game on Sunday.
Wow, what a blur.
Yeah, it just goes, man. It flows, baby. You know, you get talking about football and food. Those are two things that I love. So you know, you're never going to go wrong that way.
Best pitch man in the game. John, get in there with your first question.
Yeah, Mark, I just got to know, where did Stink come from? And do you even like being called Stink? Like, give me the rundown. How'd that come about?
Oh yeah. I mean, you don't get to pick your own nickname, right? Like the dude who introduced himself as Killer, like, you know, that dude gave himself a nickname. That dude's a toolbox, right? You don't get to pick your own nickname. So, like, the nickname Stink comes from when I was a rookie with the Washington Redskins. My sister taught school at an Eskimo village in Alaska. In Akiachuk, Alaska, right on the Kuskokwim River. And the very first run of salmon during the year, the natives would dip net the salmon, cut the heads of the salmon off, bury them in the ground, and then dig them up weeks later and eat them rotten. And they called them stinkheads. And so, I mean, you can look it up on the internet, you know, it's a stinkhead. And so, long story short, from that point forward, I was dubbed Stinkhead, and eventually it just shortened down to Stink. Now, you know, that's the truth. The good story is, which the good story is also true, is one day I had to really urinate during a game, and I just went. And it became kind of a ritual that I would just pee in my pants during games if I had to. And so, which was pretty much every game. So that's how the nickname, the moniker stuck, is that, you know, I used to urinate in my pants every game. So it was always funny after I'd get undressed after a game, and the equipment managers would all come with like these little grabby stick things, you know, to pick up my uniform. Like they didn't want to touch anything that I had on during the course of that game. So that's how the nickname stuck. And yeah, anybody who knows me, if we're acquaintances, you know, when you call, you ask for Mark. Well, for buddies, you say Stink. So that's just the way it goes.
Gotcha. That's awesome. So, you know, you touched a lot about all this great Super Bowl food that you're bringing to the table in a couple weeks, but I got to ask, if you're on death row tomorrow, what's your last meal? Is it any of this piping hot food coming out for your Super Bowl party?
Oh, no. It's straight like a bone-in ribeye, as fatty as you can make it, like charred on the top, right? Medium rare, charred on the top. Oh, my gosh, right? That's what I'm going with. If I'm on death row, that's my final meal.
Of course. And, you know, let's get into some football stuff. You know, TD, 2,000-yard rusher, 1998. You were in front of him. What do you remember most about that season, that dominant offensive line and rushing attack?
You know, we were just so tied together as a group, and it's so interesting to have that opportunity to try to defend your championship, and how teams are coming after you, and just the challenge of doing that. And just how tightly knit we were as a group, you know, as an offensive line, as an offense in general, how tightly knit we were. And I think the thing about great teams is they play for one another. It's not about your own individual accolades. It's really about us as a group. And, you know, it was really funny. Terrell Davis, the last game of the season was against the Seahawks. He needed like 177 yards. And I didn't even realize he had injured ribs. And frankly, I didn't care. It was like, we're getting you to that 2,000-yard rushing mark. And it was funny, during the course of that game, every time TD would carry the ball, we'd yell over to the sideline. We'd look over to the sideline and be like, how many does he need? And so we had a coach that was in charge of kind of keeping the chart. And he'd be like, he needs 100 more yards. You know, he needs 70 more yards. He needs 62 more yards. And so every time he ran the ball, we're shouting over to the sideline, how many more, how many more, how many more? So he was getting that 2,000 yards come hell or high water. We didn't care. We just wanted him to get it. So it was cool to be a part of that.
Stink, I want to ask you about your first Super Bowl victory with the Redskins in '91. You guys blew through the playoffs. You beat Atlanta in the divisional round 24-7. You beat Detroit in the NFC Championship game, just manhandled them 41-10, and then you beat Buffalo in the Super Bowl. Is that the most underrated Super Bowl championship team in history?
Well, it depends. I mean, I think USA Today ranked them as the best Super Bowl team in history when you talk about the complete team, offense, defense, special teams. But yeah, I don't think they probably get the credit that they deserve. You know, you think about this, 19 games over the course of the season, including the playoffs and the Super Bowl. 19 games total against, just great defenses in Detroit. They had great pass rushers in Atlanta. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills with their pass rushers and Bruce Smith, the Hall of Famer. In 19 games as an offensive line, we gave up 9 sacks in 19 games. And it wasn't just the offensive line. Obviously, the quarterback's involved, the receivers are involved, the running backs. Ernest Biner was a great blitz pickup guy. Our tight ends were really involved, but an incredible, when you think about 9 total sacks in 19 games, an incredible record.
Stink, go ahead, John.
Mark, you lined up against a ton of guys in your career. Was there ever a guy that would trash talk you on the line and backed it up with play?
Yeah, there's all kinds of guys that would trash talk. Defensive linemen love to do that. Offensive linemen, for the most part, keep their mouths shut. But, a guy like John Randall was a huge trash talker. I mean, John was a professional trash talker because John Randall would actually do research. Like, I'm studying film on what moves he makes and like, how to not overset him and how his counter moves are. And I'm just like, I'm studying him. He's studying your press guide, and he's got your family's name. He knows your wife's name. He knows your kids' names. He knows your parents' names. I mean, it just is like, and it's just this unconscious stream of garbage that he's spewing at you the whole time. Warren Sapp would talk some trash every now and again. But it's always funny. I say the further you get away from the football, the less you know and the more you talk. So wide receivers and corners are constantly talking. They're constantly jabbering and stuff. Well, they don't hit each other on every play. When you get into the trenches and you get in that line of scrimmage, for the most part, it's just a bunch of grunts and a bunch of pads popping. There's not a lot of talk going on because you have to hit each other on every single play. So there's not nearly as much talking in the interior as there is outside. We used to call that the difference between playing in the concrete and playing in the water. Those guys are out there in the water. They're splashing around. They're talking a bunch of trash. They don't have to come into the concrete where the real football happens.
Stink, when was the last time you wore all 3 of your Super Bowl rings at once? And what do you do with the AFC, NFC championship rings that you got?
I don't have any AFC championship or NFC championship rings because every time I went to the Super Bowl, I won. So, so you only get AFC championship or NFC championship games when you lose rings when you lose in the Super Bowl. Then you just get a Super Bowl ring. Yeah. So you don't get only the loser of the Super Bowl gets an AFC or NFC championship ring. So I was fortunate enough to be on great teams that went 3-0 in the Super Bowls that I got to play in. And then the only time I've ever put all 3 on, I had somebody challenging me about Baker Mayfield, some Oklahoma fan. What have you ever won? And, blah, 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 Baker's the greatest, and what have you ever won? And I just took a picture of my hand with all 3 Super Bowl rings on and basically said, I don't know, let me think about that. And posted that on social media, and it got a lot of attention. But for the most part, I don't ever wear the rings.
Mark, I love how you serve fools on Twitter. John, final question.
The last thing I got to know, Mike Shanahan, Joe Gibbs, Norv Turner, all coaches of yours. What were some of their best quirks? Every coach has a quirk.
Oh, for Joe Gibbs, he had a couple of different words where he would always say, hey. And it was my job I had a hey count in team meetings. Like Saturday night before the game, he'd give like this, 5-6 minute diatribe speech before the game. And my job as the young offensive lineman starter was to keep track of how many times he'd say hey. So Joe would always be like, hey, I'll tell you guys, hey. And, so I'd be like, huh. And then Mike Shanahan always, when he addressed us, because Mike Shanahan's a shorter guy, he would always like flex his butt cheeks and get on his tippy toes. And he'd constantly do this in the meetings. And we'd all, when or on the field. So we'd always kind of give him that same thing. We'd always be stepping on our tippy toes to see if he noticed us kind of mimicking him, but I don't think he ever really did. So some of the quirks that all coaches have them there, and it's fun. It's one of the ways you keep yourself entertained as a player.
Stink, we love you. We could talk to you all day. We respect your time, sir, and we're just so thrilled to talk to you here today.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Guys, be well, and have a great Super Bowl weekend.
You too, Mark.